Too many things at once. Okay, now we're going. And then, I'm going to hand it over to them. Feel free to introduce yourself further if you would like. And if you're not presenting, if you could please keep yourself muted. If you're asking a question, feel free to unmute yourself, but just to avoid cross noise, because we're recording this and we'll have it up on our website. Oh, let's see. I didn't think to ask that question. Dave usually does it. It might be tomorrow or the next day before we get it up, since Dave's traveling, because he usually does it. With that, I will turn it over to, I think, Tanya and Glenn, and let you direct traffic. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate joining you all today. And so what we're going to cover today is basically how we can make Columbia better and safer through a holistic approach. And so we'll start out with the pledge in regards to the law. We'll explain the pledge. We're certainly wanting your ideas and feedback on the pledge. And then we'll also cover Team Como and what we've been doing with that. And so basically, if you think about a holistic society, if you think about sports, if you think about anything, there always has to be rules and laws that are part of the equation. And then there's also got to be mentoring and support and an opportunity, as the whole picture. And so that's where we're coming from today. And so any question you have is always welcome. I think I'm okay if you raise your hand and ask the question, while we're presenting, so that way it might be relevant to that moment. That's totally fine with me. And Glenn is right here and Tony's right there. So the three of us will be answering any of the questions at any time. So, all right. So the first one is the pledge. And the reason that the pledge came about was because I personally went to the use of force presentation after what happened at Harpo's to try to understand more of what, how things happen, what is actually going on in the moment. And so that's where all that came from. And so I'll just read the pledge verbatim. It says, the reduction of the use of force incidents. Number 1, follow the law and do not commit a crime. Number 2, respect the police and recognize their legitimate authority. 3, when given instructions or commands by a police officer, comply. 4, do not resist or fight the police. 5, demand that local, county, and state prosecutors strictly enforce all laws with vigorous prosecution. 6, if you believe that you have been treated or arrested unfairly, request the officer's name and badge number and use the appropriate complaint and/or legal system after the incident to investigate and address the issue. So we wanted to talk to you all about the pledge first and see if you had any feedback and see if that's something you all agree with, you want to support, if you have any edits that you would like to make, and ultimately we may end up, totally agreeing, we may not agree, we may partially agree, and that's okay, because basically I think what's going on in, the last 10 or 12 years, and especially with COVID, is that everyone's gotten very isolated, and we're not doing the creative brainstorming we need to do to figure out how to create a safe and holistically healthy society. And so by going through the creative process of talking and brainstorming, we're all hoping that we can, come up with something that's really dynamic for our community.
Marie, I see your hand is up. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I just have a question. I need a little more context for what this pledge is about. I mean, who's going to take it? Who is it? Who's going to be shared with? What's the purpose of it, I guess, would be helpful to me to understand.
Sure. Yeah. So we So in Columbia, I had presented this pledge to city council, probably maybe in May or June. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that everyone knows that it's important. The law aspect of our community is important. And I think that there has been over time sort of a confusion of everything. And so if we had different groups coming out saying that, yes, we support the pledge, then I think it would just help with the communication aspect so that people understood, yes, we want all the social programs and we also want the law and order so that we can have a holistically safe and thorough sort of dynamic within our society.
And let me add too that from my perspective of being a career criminal, been shot by the police as a child, and prison in and out for 23 years, and coming back, and the body of work that I can pat myself on the back of doing since I've been home. I look at the law different, if you look at it from a so-called Black perspective and the historically uneven playing fields that we've been having to climb up that hill with, then you look at it a little differently. However, if you look at it from a human standpoint and say, you know what, the slave owner didn't enslave me. Or if your cousin got a history of, a European, you got a history of being a slave owner, they didn't enslave me. So all I want to do is look at you as being fair, being a human being, and having the same rights as any other human being that walks the face of the earth. The pledge is a strong word, because you ask who should sign the pledge. Or, okay, from that perspective, I feel personally that to start the conversation, a word has to be used. To disagree or agree with the conversation, we have to do it in love. And whatever it is, let's do it in a fair and a just way, so that everybody can have the same opportunity to live and have the same opportunity to thrive right here in the town that I'm dying for. I live here, and I've been here all my, ever since I was 7 years old. So, and you don't have to agree to it, but let's start the conversation so that we can build a community of safety in Columbia, Missouri. Because as you know, there's a lot of shootings going out there. And if you do the things that I do and have done for the last 25 years since I've been home from prison, and knocking on doors, sitting with the roaches, sitting with the dirty dishes, sitting with yards that can't be cut, sitting with sidewalks that can't be shoveled because of the inferior complex that an African American or so-called African American may have, or a single parent home. Or then I look at it from a bigger perspective. I look at it from a spiritual standpoint, and I say, you know what? Guess what? Everybody is the same. You can't, if you call me something different than a human being, then you separate yourself from me. So now I've learned in my spiritual growth and development that everybody to me is my brother or my sister. You can call yourself a Democrat, a Republican, a Black or a white, a Catholic or a Muslim. I don't care. But to me, you're my sister and I'm your brother. And that's just what it is. So the conversation starts now. And I applaud Tanya for taking on a pretty big role doing this thing. Actually, she's doing most of the work. I'm just kind of in the background because I've been out front for 25 years. I kind of like, I got married again, so I got a family now, and they breaking me. So at any rate, to level the playing field, let's be just, let's be open-minded. And I've been all over the United States speaking in the last 25 years. And the first thing I tell anybody, regardless of what background they come from, the mind is like a parachute. It only works if it's open. So that's just to add to what she's been saying about the pledge. So I hope that answers some of the question anyway.
David Mallory, would you want to ask your question?
Yes, I think Tanya mentioned right at the beginning something about an incident at Harpo's. Could you fill me in on that? I'm not familiar what incident you're talking about.
Yes, so I think it was in May. Now that we're in September, I'm not exactly sure, but anyway, there was a man in front of Harpo's that the bouncers had already detained because of potential behavior that was not what they wanted as bouncers. And the police officers came and were trying to get him to comply. And during the use of force training that I went to, there were some very interesting things that I found out that police officers have to figure out in the split second that they're there. And that is that they have to assess the situation. They have to account for the safety of the people in the immediate area. And there were probably anywhere between 20 to 40 people in front of Harpo's right at that moment. They have to be concerned about the safety of the officers there. And then they also, third, have to be concerned about the safety of the suspect. And so they were all trying to work together to get that man into handcuffs because, and this question came up, you don't ask somebody questions in that sort of dangerous situation until you have them in handcuffs, because you have to pat them down after they're in handcuffs so that you can determine if they have a knife or a gun. And that you also can't go by what a suspect tells you, because the suspect is not going to tell you necessarily that they have a gun or they have a knife. So you can't go on their words. You have to go on the actions of the suspect. And so as the suspect was not complying to the officer's commands, then the use of force ramped up, and it went from verbal orders to pepper spray to joint manipulation to taser to striking blows to distract the suspect that as they were trying to get him handcuffed. And so with that, it was caught on video, and there was a lot of reaction to that situation. And that's why I wanted to go educate myself as to what is what are the laws, what's the playbook, you know, so to speak, of the police, of what they're supposed to do in that situation, because the man was very tall and large. And so they were finally able to put him in handcuffs and take him to the hospital and things like that, because of a lot of reasons. But anyway, I just think that the public's reaction was judging the police officers, and they had a reaction, but they didn't know what the steps were on what the police officers plural had been trained to do and why. And that's what I wanted to find out. And that's why I went to that use of force training.
Do I see any other hands? And make sure I haven't looked over. And then somebody asked about the pledge. I pulled it from an earlier email, and it's in the chat, the whole pledge. I guess just speaking for myself, not speaking for as president, but just as a citizen. Mr. Cobbins said that he thinks that everybody should have the same rights, which of course we would all agree, and that they should be applied fairly and justly, which of course any reasonable person would agree with. My concern, and this is me being a white person who doesn't really have to worry about this as much for me or my kids, especially being a white woman, it's been pretty clearly proven that the laws aren't being applied the same to everyone, and it's not fair and just. If you look at the rates of incarceration, if you look at the sentencing for people with one certain color of skin versus the sentences people get if they have a different color of skin for exactly the same behavior, the system is not fair and just. And so it makes me a little uncomfortable to back this pledge, because I feel like the underpinnings of what you're asking are not fair or true. And so, I personally have quite a bit of confidence in our police officers, and I think most of them are great. But I think I've seen over time, we do have a few bad actors. And to ask people who are at risk to take some kind of a pledge saying, I'm going to do whatever they say, when what they're saying might not even be legal or them acting in the realm of what they're supposed to be doing as officers, it just makes me personally a little uncomfortable. It seems a little too strict, I guess, and doesn't allow leeway for those situations where somebody isn't acting in good faith, fairly and justly. David, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at what you had what you put in the chat. I think you put everything in the chat from there, rather than just the 6 things that Tanya read that was the pledge. There was a lot of follow-up in the email. I think that we got included in there also. That just a little bit kind of cluttered it up a little bit. The pledge that she read was the first 6 items. Wanted to clarify that in case someone's trying to read through it and see how long all this stuff is.
Well, and so I know because it is a very tricky thing as far as I understand what you're saying. And yet, let's say in that Harpo's incident, let's say that the police didn't make that person comply. They didn't do the use of force and they stepped away. And so what would happen if that suspect had a gun and then he stood up and he started shooting everybody? And we had 5 dead people instead of 1 person that had, and he slowed the video down. So you could see, first they gave him directions. Second, they pepper sprayed him. Third, they did the joint manipulation. Fourth, they did the taser. Then they did the striking blows. And so, and then what he said was that he explained about how
Excuse me, Tanya, who's he?
Yeah.
You said he slowed the video?
Don Weaver, who is the CPOA lawyer. And he explained all this. And he also showed a video where 2 men did not comply. And they kept verbally saying that everything was fine and that they weren't doing anything that they shouldn't do. And in the video, the first guy whipped out a gun and then he shot the officer. And then in the second video, there were something like 4 officers. This was a national story. There were 4 officers and the guy was saying that everything was fine. And then he whipped out the gun and got off 8 shots before the police could react. And so what Don was saying was that the police officers have to go with the knowledge that they have at the moment. They have to have the suspect comply so that they can pat down the suspect for the safety of everyone in the area. And then they can have conversations. And so as I learned what the actual moments of decisions that officers have to make, it is understandable that when you don't know what's going on and there is a suspect that's not complying and you're the officer responsible for every person in the crowd's safety, that changes the dynamic of what you feel is responsible, because you don't have the hindsight of knowing 24 hours later that the person didn't have a gun or they didn't have a knife. And so that's what I learned the most from that.
Pam, I think your hand's been up longer, and then we'll go to
I
Kathy.
still have a question. What was the man doing that he was being, I guess he was being asked to leave? What was his behavior? I never did find out.
Yeah, I have not totally found out either. I don't know if he just wanted to go into Harpo's and he wasn't showing his ID. I don't know if he didn't want to pay the cover. I don't know what the original incident was as far as why he wasn't
Well,
complying.
that
I mean,
doesn't tell me anything then.
That's right.
I'm
You have to
sorry.
correct it. Yeah. That's go ahead.
Pam.
Something happened. I got kicked off. Here.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
So I feel like I don't know what happened, and nothing was ever said. So, you know, it would take something for the police to do what they did, and maybe it was quite appropriate, but I would like to know the whole story, and we don't. So.
And also, let's not get too much into the weeds. I mean, that's one
Right.
incident, and Tanya had mentioned it just because it was the one that inspired her to get more
Sure,
involved. But
sure.
we might want to. It might be more useful for conversation for this conversation to just know that happened as one
Yeah.
example. But maybe we could think a little more broadly about just
Sure.
generalizing a little more too,
Well,
and get stuck on this.
Pledge sounds to me like what mothers of color tell their sons how to act and to be safe. So that's quite usual.
Kathy, do you want to ask your question?
Kathy. What? Oh,
I was just going to clarify that actually, Pam, there was quite a bit of news coverage about this incident. You may not have caught it because it was on television, and I know you read newspapers and listen to the radio, perhaps more than watch television. But the man's crime was that he didn't want to pay the $10 cover charge to get in, and for some reason, and there was a scuffle with the bouncers, and I suppose maybe they called the police. But what was concerning to many people was the amount of use of force, and the fact that it's my understanding that use of force is supposed to be proportional. And when a man is handcuffed, lying on his stomach, on his face, on the sidewalk, the policeman struck the man several times in the face. And that's what many people were very concerned about. It did not seem proportional at all to the situation.
Thank you.
I put a link to the first one that came up in Google was the KRCG coverage. It's in the chat. If you click on that link, should open a new tab on your computer, and then just hit pause real fast, and that can stay open until we're done with our meeting. That way you don't miss the conversation. But if you want to watch that later, it'll be there. Scott, what did you want to add?
Okay, well, I'm not so much about this particular event that I wanted to add. I want to learn more about this organization and where it's planning to go, how you want people to participate in this. I realized this was a trigger event that helped start that, but where do we go from here is what I'm really more interested in. And I gather since it is set up as an organization, you all have plans for going forward.
So yes, so the pledge was sort of just its own thing. And then I went to a town hall meeting about that and about just the community in general. It wasn't specifically about that, but it was about the community and, you know, how can we make things better for everyone? And I serve on the Peace Board as vice president. And so that Peace and Destiny of Hope were hosting the town hall. And at the town hall, I met Glenn, and we were talking about how Columbia has changed. It's changed because of the population growth so quickly. And what can we do in the community to make a difference? And so from that, I also met with Reverend Gray, and we came up with a name called Team Como, Heart of the Community, and talked to Reverend Charles Stevenson and Erica Buford, and we announced Team Como in a press conference, and we had a summit on July 29th where we invited the community to hear what's actually going on. And so we had 4 panelists. We had Julian Jackman from Peace, we had Lonnie Lockhart Bay from Destiny of Hope, we had Reverend Charles Stevenson from Powerhouse, and we had Nanette Ward from Stop Human Trafficking
and the mayor
in Central Missouri, and the mayor also, Barbara Buffalo. She was able to be there. And so they presented what was going on in the community, and we had 60 people there. Kathy was there, and they explained just, how if you have the word school to prison pipeline, what happens is emotionally all the teachers in the room shut down because it sounds negative and shaming. But if you understand what the concept means, where it is basically illiteracy, if you are learning to read by 3rd grade, and then if you're at a great reading level, then you can read to learn after that. But if you are not at grade level, then you're being taught all these new things, but you're never able to really catch up and learn as much. And then your job opportunities are not equal with your peers. And so they were explaining about how that causes without job opportunity, without financial stability, proper education, how it all ties together, and then how that ends up with a high incarceration rate of people that are in jail.
And then let me add to this, Scott. How you doing? I was
Doing good,
when
thanks.
last time I was in prison, I wrote a program called Boys to Men. You know, what did it take? Why come I end up in jail all the time? What was I missing that kept me locked up in some type of institution? You know, for 23 years, actually from the 8 to 38, you know, juvie all the way through it. And so I finally realized that I had been going by societal law or societal
Expectation.
no, I want to say societal. Let's stick with societal law for now. I'll come up with a better word, because they wanted, I was supposed to act a certain way because of my culture, because of who I am, because of what I ate, because of my ancestors, whatever the case may have been, right? So I'm gonna get to you in a minute, Scott, because you asked a good question about Team Como, and that's why I'm here right now. See, I thought that I had the formula to make everybody come together as one, because you know what? I dirtied my society up, and I shouldn't be here talking to you right now the things I've done. I'm not proud of none of it, not absolutely none of it. The only thing that I could say that I'm proud of is it made me, the character that's in me now, be a very strong character. That's the only thing that came out of it. The suffering and all that stuff, it was a lot of it I did to myself, even with the police officers. You know, I did to myself because I was supposed to act a certain way because the way I dress, or because of the color of my skin, or because I grew up, or the environment I came out, you know, all that's a lie. So that being said, right, where's Team Como going in my eyes? And when I call myself trying to let her see the other side of the street, right? I tried to get I had 18 African, so-called African-American, so-called Black, so-called Asiatic, whatever you want to call them, male figures that would say, you know what, we're going to show y'all that you guys are not inferior to nobody. You serve the same God. You can dress how you want to, you can live how you want to, and you got to make your own opportunity. And you got to demand that respect, but you got to give it, and you got to give it in love. So when I went to the town hall meeting with Peace and Destiny of Hope, I saw Tanya there, and the first thing they said was the thing I've been doing for 24 years. Bounce houses and picnics. Oh my God, sick of them, right? So I tell her, it takes finance to uplift a nation. We need finance. We need people that are sincere, but we also need spiritual guidance, man, because everybody around this table that's on this Zoom got their own idea about what's right and wrong. But we got to come to a place where we can, what are the commonalities? What can we agree on that's common that could help our society grow and thrive? So when Tanya bothered me and paid me to be here today, no, that's a joke, okay? The only thing I could think of is, you know what? Sometimes if we put the color aside and listen to somebody who got the vision, then maybe we could grow. And so when I seen her trying to do that, it inspired me to come off my couch because I was gaining weight, eating up everything my wife would cook, and more. When she goes to bed, I sneak downstairs to get more. Anyway, I understood what her vision was and the energy and the vibration of what she was trying to do. And to get all of the non-for-profits together, for one, to get all of the so-called Republicans, the so-called Democrats, the so-called whoever they are. I don't really care about titles and ties. And Scott, you know that. All y'all probably know that about me. So to answer your question, Scott, I think the Team Como, being led by Tanya Heath and being supported by everybody who wants to make a change, will bring this whole county together and maybe even be a prototype for the United States. Who knows? But I'm in all the way. I'm 100% in. And I know my passion is there. My clarity is there. My education is there. My justice there. My activism is there. And my love for people and God's creation is there. So how in the heck can I lose? And that's where we at. And
There's
that's
a
my
question.
sermon for today.
Sorry. There's a question in the chat from Kathy, who sometimes has trouble with connectivity, so she types them. She asks, Was the town hall that you're talking about hosted by Councilman Roy Lovelady and STAAR, a new
No.
Columbia Social Action? Was that the one, or was it a different one? That was your question.
No.
It was
Not that
led by Peace and Destiny of Hope, although I did
Lonnie
go
Lockhart Bay.
Lonnie Lockhart Bay
and
for
Julian
Destiny of
Jackman.
Hope and Julian Jackman of Peace. And that's people effectively changing, people embracing change effectively. Sorry. And so, and I did go to the one with Roy. I got the tail end of it because I was at a peace board meeting. I've gone to 2 of his, and because anyway, the same night as the board meeting, but anyway. And so what we've done since our formation of Team Como is that we have organized, the goal is to bring the community information about what's actually going on in Columbia. We did it with our first panel. And then we are inviting people to volunteer in our community to make a difference. And so some of the things that we've done so far is that we had volunteers volunteer to stuff the supplies that Peace and Destiny of Hope already had, stuff about 500 backpacks, and then hand those out at Lang Middle School. And then a different group of volunteers, they went and helped do stuff for Powerhouse and what they were doing at the West Middle School. It was at the pavilion next to West Middle School. We've done that. We have also supported the Nick Danger Hip Hop Unity Day event, which was this past Sunday. And so that was helpful because, you know, the youth are going to be inspired not just with reading and writing, but with art and with singing and dance. And so that was a great thing. And then I've also personally worked with a lady at Columbia Housing Authority that had a situation. And then we are in talks with CPS about a reading buddy program, and that idea, yeah, that came out of the summit. And then I've also helped out with publicity to promote things that are going on that nonprofits are doing. For instance, there was the Demerit nonprofit event that the nonprofit organizations went out there. And so I've helped with publicity for that. And then we've also, the other thing about it is that basically there is a disconnect in people's understanding of what's going on in Columbia. And oh yes. Oh yeah, okay. And then here's the other thing. So there's a young Black business society that we're also working on because, and that was my husband's idea, basically, is that if you look around Columbia, you will see these amazing, talented young professionals who happen to be Black come to Columbia, and they stay for basically 2 to 5 years, and then they move on. And why is that? It's because if they happen to be the only one in a department or in a business, and they're not able to meet others that are, you know, making things exciting in Columbia, they feel very isolated. And so they go to St. Louis or Kansas City, where they can make friends, date, you know, have business opportunities and all sorts of stuff. And so that will just continue to happen if we do not figure out a way to create a social event so that they can all come together and meet, and then have it, you know, sponsored by different business organizations. Oh, and then the other thing about it. Okay, so think about this. I was born and raised in Columbia. So when it was time for me to get my first job at 16, my backdoor neighbor who was older than me happened to work at Ken's Pizza. And so he said to me, "Hey, Tanya, they've got an opening. Why don't you come and work at Ken's Pizza as a waitress?" And I went and interviewed, and I was in 4-H. I had a resume. I, you know, was on the honor roll, all this sort of stuff. And so I was hired. But he opened the door for me to, one, know about the job, and B, he put in a good word with his boss because he was a good employee. So how many people are in a lower income situation that don't have those contacts? And so what we also want to do is go talk to the chamber and figure out a way that we can meet the youth. We can understand their interests in various jobs. We can become those mentors. We can become the ones who know about job opportunities. And then we can be the ones that say, yes, I will recommend so-and-so to this friend of mine that I know, because we've got to address it holistically as far as what are the actual barriers and how are we unintentionally not doing everything we can because we don't know who needs a job. And so we'd like to be that person, but we don't know how. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk to the chamber about. We're going to talk to the, Peace, Destiny of Hope, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club. How can we figure this out? Because there's 120,000 of us. We are so smart. We are so lucky to live in Columbia, and we can do better. We just have to creatively figure it out.
Mari, do you have another question or comment?
Yeah, and you started to answer my question actually, Tanya. But maybe you can talk about it a little more. Having been involved in the United Way for many years, belonging to a Rotary Club, been involved in various nonprofit organizations as a volunteer, there are a lot of groups and people in Columbia who are trying to address some of these same issues. And so I guess what I'd like to ask is what you feel is unique about your approach, and then how are you going to work with the others in the community that are also kind of striving toward the same goals?
Yes. So we are not at all competing with the other nonprofits. Not at all. We are trying to engage with an increase of volunteers. We're trying to reach into the community and get more people to leave their COVID couch and go live a more exciting life than the characters they see on Netflix, and go do it. Because I think everyone got in the habit during Netflix to just sit and be a passive audience. And instead we need to go out into the community and find out what is going on. And how we're going to do that is we're going to create a way to have people know each other and form that community and get excited. The other thing I want to say is that there are two competing messages in Columbia, and I think this is really important for everyone to think about, is that if you're in a certain social group and you routinely hear that our city is rated in the top 50 or the top 30 or the top 15 of best cities to live in the country, and then all your peers are saying, yeah, this is great living in Columbia and all this sort of stuff, so then that's what you believe. And our medium income is, whatever it is, and we have all these education opportunities of higher learning in Columbia. And so the message is, yeah, Columbia is great. We're wonderful. We're doing these amazing things. But then if you look at the statistics and you find out that in 2021, that 67.7% of students were at school 90% of the time or higher. And that means that over 25% were not at school 25% of the time. That is a huge gap and very concerning for many reasons. And then if you understand that there's 44% on free and reduced lunch, well, what's going on there? And then also there are 20% of minority students that are reading at grade level, which means that there are 80% that are not. And so how can we also balance all the great things that are going on in Columbia with the actual needs of what's going on in Columbia? And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the message out of what people aren't hearing, so that they can then engage as a volunteer. And seriously, they can go and they can be with one of the whichever nonprofit that they're excited about. They can be, you know, with the Kiwanis Club, they can be with the Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Club, Peace and Destiny, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, 4-H, Coyote Hill, Granny's House, Heart of the Missouri Girls on the Run, Ronald McDonald, Rainbow House, Daydream Foundation, you know. So we want to lift those up so that people can find their passion and make a difference. Because if we knew during, you know, the football meetings with the parents or the soccer meetings or basketball meetings that so-and-so would like to try out and they would be an amazing athlete, but maybe their parents only have one car, or maybe their parents have no car. And so as a community, how can we have that awareness to say, hey, it is so easy for me to take my daughter home and drop you off before we go home. Those kinds of things.
And let me add something to, you know, when we think about the marginalized communities, first thing come to my head, and most people that I work with over these years head, is that Black people, number one, Mexican, Hispanic, number two, immigrants, number three. So we had Imani Mission Center. We kind of did. We went for that okie doke for a while, and then we got to thinking one time. Actually, my second marriage, I was in Mexico and honeymooning, and I would get on the beach and I would meditate every day. And that's when Alameda Creighton was the first ward city council woman. And I got to thinking about, you know what? We always want to say this old poor Black person, or this old Hispanic, this old immigrant, and all these things. There's only one Native American, you know, and everybody else is immigrant, as far as I'm concerned. That's what history tells us. But there's something bigger than that. To me, I would rather be poor financially, economically, physically, than to be poor spiritually. So the people who are spiritually destitute or spiritually impoverished, they should not let no one in this town or anybody around them be poor, physically, financially, or economically. So to answer that, to piggyback on what Tanya is saying, the things that are normal are easy for me. I can do them in my sleep. I wrote programs, I've started programs, but that doesn't cut it. The thing that cuts it for me, that got me out of this rut that I was in for 38 years, was I had to know who I was. I had to know there was a power greater than that of man that could guide me. And then where I can look at my brother across the hall, across the table, and say, we are the same. How much money you got? Because most people got all that money are terribly miserable. They can go to have yachts and do vacation. Who cares? But I didn't have anything coming out of prison. I was the happiest man. I picked up a 33-gallon trash can and went through the projects when I got out of prison, picked up trash. I was the happiest man on earth. So that being said, you know, they separate church and state. I know about all that kind of stuff too, because I've been in it so long. However, a person that will see another person, and this what Tanya didn't mention, every group that she has talked to, or that I have talked to, or that we invited to the table, or that we have represented, or that she had wrote press releases for, we're playing them up. We can, even if we see a deficiency, God said to cover your brother's fault. We're going to play you up. We don't care about your deficiency. Let's correct everything and let's be better. Let's be competitive to make each other better so we can make this thing happen. You know, for everybody, because no person from the womb to the tomb on this earth is safe. Like the guy that killed that fought the lady out to the Highlands, he went through my program. He went all the way through. His whole family did. The Barnett kid fought the lady home from the bank and killed himself, according to the records. So that makes everybody at risk, not just people that can't afford their rent or people who think they're inferior, you know. So we want to lift everybody up, everybody. And that's what Team Como is about. Mm-hmm. The Team Columbia. Mm-hmm. Team Columbia. White, black, male, female, Catholic, Muslim, it don't make any difference. Rich, poor, it doesn't make any difference. Let's just go at it. I'm ready. Before I get the dirt thrown on me in my grave, I want to know the 3 words that I stood for with love, peace, and joy before I leave this earth. And the 4th one is unity. So that's it.
Mm-hmm. 2 comments from the chat. one about the 44% of CPS students being on reduced or no-cost lunches. Kathy suggests one aspect of this is too many employers are not paying their employees a living wage. I agree with that personally. And then the second comment is, I think in reference to the spiritual deficits people are experiencing, that it's maybe churches are not doing a good enough job, or maybe the suggestion is that they need to step up a little bit. And
Churches.
So we are having, I have had 7 already, and and then we're inviting more people. This time we're having an 8th meditation and interfaith prayer walk, and it's going to be on Sunday, October 8th at 2 p.m. We're going to meet at the city keyhole, and we are going to walk silently up to 10th Street. Then we're going to cross to the south side of Broadway, walk down to 5th Street, cross at 5th Street, and then walk back up to the city keyhole. And so I purposely, since the first one was the Sunday before Thanksgiving in November of 21, I've purposely called it the Meditation and Interfaith Prayer Walk, because if you're agnostic, atheist, if you're Christian, Islamic, Jewish, any faith, we invite you to join us, because in the heart of the city there, all that peace just radiates out into our community. And we just really want everybody to be aware of the truth, be aware of the good things, and then just do a little bit. 120,000 of us, if we all did a little bit, that would make such a huge difference. And the other thing, before I forget, is that unfortunately, the people, they said on the south side police meeting, they said that fentanyl is the #1 illegal drug that they are most concerned about in Columbia. And so I just think about how that, if you think of the youth in our future, the people who are perhaps lost, they don't know what they're doing, all this sort of stuff, it's like, who's talking to them? Are we talking to them, or is someone else talking to them that is not in their best interest? And so if we are not consciously making sure that each of us is making an effort, the other side might be making a daily effort, and that daily effort might result in the downfall of our community.
There's no doubt about it.
And so we have got to consciously every day invite our friends, invite our neighbors, invite our community to do something, so that we have the stronger pull as to which direction our future and the future of our youth is going to go. And that is the #1 thing that we are constantly wanting to do, is make a difference, help the youth realize that their life is worth something, that their future is worth something, and that the Democrats and Republicans, and that the people from the south side and the north side and the east side and the west side, we all want the best for our youth.
Pam, I saw your hand up. Were you wanting to get the details for the announcements? Oh, you found it. Okay, great. Okay. The hour is winding to a close. Does anybody else have a question or comment before we close out our meeting for this week, or close out our presentation for this week and go on to the business meeting?
I'll just let Tanya know that I will put it in our announcements.
Thank you so much.
The meditation and interfaith prayer walk. And if people have any questions, they can contact you.
Yes, please do. And thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here and talking about all your efforts. We appreciate your efforts to make our city a better place. I think you're right that it's certainly something that we all have to work on together. So we appreciate you being here and opening those lines of communication. Pam, are you ready to do the weekly announcements?
I am.
Okay, I will.
So we're gonna say goodbye.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
See
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Have a good day. God bless you.
And hopefully I have you set up for success here, Pam, because I don't know if Dave normally does something.
Yeah, no,